Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of our Share Green Design podcast. Today with us, we have Alina and Jesper. So Alina representing HouseEurope and Jesper from the OBEL Foundation. And before we start with anything else, I would like Alina to hear from you. What is HouseEurope?
Hi, Juan. Hi, Jesper. Thanks for having me. So HouseEurope is a European citizens initiative and a non-profit platform that works on making the built environment and the environment and our housing situation in Europe better through different ways. We are somehow destined to become the Greenpeace of the built environment, how we call it now. We've been working on this for 3 years. We are a network of over 200 partners all over Europe now, mostly European Union countries. And we are running a European Citizens Initiative this year, which is called HouseEurope Power to Renovation. And it's trying to make renovation the norm for the construction sector.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, and it's something that I've listened to a lot happening. I think getting the recognition of the OBEL Award, which we'll listen about now, it's very important because it's giving voice to groups that are usually not given that platform. So your message will hopefully get more traction. So can you see that happening? Are you getting more traction since you get the OBEL Award?
Yes, absolutely. That is partially to how the OBEL Award has been helping to communicate the initiative as well, and of course the funds that are coming with that. So that's fantastic, but also the decision of giving an architecture award to an initiative like this or a project like this gives a lot of legitimacy within the sector, and that's really fantastic.
Thank you very much. And Jesper, from your point of view, representing the OBEL Award and the OBEL Foundation, why did you decide it? Or there is a jury, of course. So if you could tell us a bit more about the OBEL Foundation actually and how the awards are given, because each year, what I like about the OBEL Award, and I've known it for a number of years, is that each year you select a topic and it's not about a career or a professional. So could you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. Like HouseEurope, we are a small organization but with big ambitions, and we are now running our 7th year. And you're right, the way we work is that we have a jury that selects a theme. It's a way for them to communicate what they think is either lacking in the general discussion or something that would like to put focus on. They also select the winner. We have an all discussion based process. We're being fed projects from all over the world. However, the jury is not obliged to choose among them. They choose the project that they find is right and embodies what it is that they would like to sort of tell the world or be in a dialogue with the world about. And then once we have the project, we try to support the best we can. It comes with a cash prize of 100,000 euros, which is making it one of the greatest in the world. But the most important thing for us is really to stretch what an architecture award can go to. That's one thing. And the other thing is to look forward. It's always about looking forward. What can that project bring forward? What knowledge, what experience, what can be in the sort of in the wake of the spotlight that they will be getting for some time. And that's how we see ourselves. In Danish, you call it someone helping the birth. I think the English translation is something to get the ball rolling. So we see ourselves as someone who can get the ball rolling and point to things that we need to discuss.
Mm. I think it's remarkable because I see it from outside also as a risk, because you could go for there are so many good things being done at the moment that would get that they are already well known, and other previous winners of the award are mainly architects, I believe, or the ones I'm aware of. But I think when you give the award to something, a platform or an initiative, sorry, not a platform, an initiative like HouseEurope, I'm sure someone would say, well, there is a risk here and other considerations that it's not just an award about work done. This is much more, and it gets into political and other factors and considerations.
Well, that's a fair point. However, I would say that no man is an island. You know that architecture is not being created by the one single genius architect, but it's much more about a communal action. And actually, one of our jurors said an interesting thing during the deliberation. They said that HouseEurope shows that architects can be more than the ones just taking orders. You know, they can also be the ones taking part in shaping society rather than being designers of the built environment. And to that extent, I think that's a strong way of seeing that architects are citizens too. So in that sense, you know, why not?
Yeah, and I think it's an important topic as well. And so I'm glad that HouseEurope is getting this award. And in the last few years, I've seen a change. And I think what you mentioned earlier, Alina, that is across Europe. I think when we talk about Europe, different countries are going at different speeds on renovation. So I live in London for many years, and I think there's people value buildings that have a history, and it doesn't have to be a history of 200 years. It could be a 40 years history, and it's about a building that was used for whatever, a different use, and they like keeping that history there. So it varies across. The other thing that I see happening as well is that the schools of architecture are focusing much more in renovations, retrofit, transformational use than before. So when I was a student, it's a few years ago, but not that long, I don't remember doing any renovation work. Now it's probably the main topic in many schools of architecture, probably because the university knows that those students, that's going to be the main source of work for them. Or so that change is happening. I would like to ask you, Alina, how did you said you started working on this 3 years ago. So who founded HouseEurope, and how the idea came across, and what is your background? Tell us a bit more about you and how HouseEurope was born.
Yes. Okay. So HouseEurope was born by an architecture firm and collaborative practice, B+ in Berlin. It's 4 people right now: Arno Brandelhuber, Olaf Graber, Jonas Janke, and Roberta Jocic. And they have been working on something called legislating architecture for a long time. And they have had this for a while already, this like very collaborative way of working. And they also have a chair at ETH in Zurich, and they teach there. And I actually came to work with them because I ran a street newspaper, which was on art and culture, and that circulated on the streets. And we worked on a publication for the Venice Architecture Biennale together. And then because I guess my background is as an art historian, a political scientist, a communication strategist, I have been mostly working at these like fringes and these like I really don't like the word intersection, but like kind of these points where the public has access, or people who don't usually have access to a very specific kind of cultural work, how to bring that together. One way of working was doing that through a tool like the street newspaper. Another way of working like that is a tool like the European Citizens Initiative, and that's kind of how we started working together on that. And there's also a big understanding, this is why I said Greenpeace earlier for the built environment, that there is, as also Jesper said, the understanding of like, how can we as citizens gain back a certain kind of control, gain back a certain kind of stake. I think we kind of like think of stakeholders. Now, I would like to think that the public is a very big stakeholder that should have much more power in general. So how can that be linked to your personal profession? Because I made the experience that really often is about just one person, even if that is just in a, you know, in a administrative role, an office, something like that, that can make such a big difference. So it's really on all of us and that coming together as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's important. And on the, you said that there were founders, B+ for the founders, and you were part of it as well, but you also said that there are over 200 partners or collaborators at the moment. So who are those partners and collaborators that are joining HouseEurope? Where are they from? Backgrounds? So, and are you seeing, is that open? So can people join HouseEurope? How is that process?
So a European Citizens Initiative as a tool itself that was implemented by the European Union requires at least 7 different people or organizations in 7 different European countries to come together and say, we believe that there is a lack in legislation, there's a lack in political power on XYZ topic. We decided it's renovation. We decided it's like, yeah, okay, coming out of that. And but one could also do this around animal rights, human rights, whatever. And so in the very first instance, we said we actually want to try and find 27 partners all over, like for every single country that joins us in this fight. Because if we're serious about finding 1 million signatures, or at least making like a big campaign around awareness for the topic, then we really want to like do that on a European scale. And then, of course, because we're coming out of the architecture world, the construction sector, there's loads of people who joined, especially in the very beginning, who are architects, who are working within the industry. And then it kind of like broadened to environmental organizations, to political organizations, to, you know, from the Architecture Council Europe, working more on legislation. We also are supported and support smaller initiatives that just try and save one building that is supposed to be demolished in one specific city. So like it's a very broad array of, you know, individuals and organizations that are
That's
now.
good to hear. And if someone listening wanted to join, wherever they do, what should they do? Should they reach out to go to your website and reach out to you? Do they have to set up a form and apply, or how would that work?
We have a fantastic newsletter that you can just subscribe to on our website, houseeurope.eu. And you also have the option to say that you would like to volunteer or work with us. It's just a tick as a box, and then we'll get back to you.
So, thank you. And then let's get a bit on what is HouseEurope and what it is. So if you have to describe the main activity of HouseEurope, other than awareness, because I know you have a huge campaign of raising awareness about the problem, but what, other than that awareness, what would be the main activity of HouseEurope?
So because it's a European Citizens Initiative, we also kind of like, I mean, we made a very strong point about having a very strong legal proposal. So for more than a year, we worked on the legal proposal that we submitted to the European Commission. And that has several points within it. One, I think, of the strongest one that is very interesting for people is that we want to make renovation cheaper and easier and faster. And there are different tools and ways of doing that. One is very linked to what you said earlier about how it differs in the European countries, how much is renovated, how little is renovated, and that is related to tax and taxation. So we're trying to have a tax incentive and make renovation work, so materials and labor cheaper. And that is kind of at the moment a discrimination if you look at the new construction.
That links nicely with something I wanted to ask next, which is, what is the scale of the problem we are talking about here, and the number of buildings that are being demolished? That's one. And well, let's talk about that one. Then we talk about barriers after. So how many buildings are we talking about that are being demolished every year in Europe, or each country, or data that people can get an understanding about?
Yes. So thank you for addressing this very big problem, because there is deliberately not very much information on that, on actually demolition of houses, on vacancies, as well as usage. And why is that? Because there's a big interest in not in keeping it hidden, right? Because if it becomes visible, then suddenly there's a need for action. So what we did, of course, try to look at what the scale of the problem is. And there are sector studies, and the conservative calculation that we came to by looking at like sort of the stats that are around for Europe. We're looking at one house to be demolished per minute. That means that's kind of like the conservative calculation. If you are a little more broad on what really is happening, there could also be 3 a minute. But overall, what we're trying to look at really is 55% of the waste in, for example, Germany is produced by the construction sector. We know that 38% of the waste of the CO2 emissions are produced by the construction sector. So there are very clear statistics that are linked to our lives that are out there and that people know of, and that or not know of, because in comparison, people usually speak about why we shouldn't fly, and flying is terrible, but it's only 3.5% of the CO2 emissions, whereas the construction sector is 38%. But we don't talk about it, and there's a very good reason for that.
Yeah. And I think that we need to put everything into a balance and compare. I think I agree with you. My background is in architecture construction, so I'm used to deal with that data. But you're right. That's why your awareness campaign, I think it's important. Others, similar initiatives that we'll talk about that later. So when you talk about what you said about the tax and the link to the renovation and the amount of houses being demolished, and I think something you touch on that's very relevant is the vacancy, because when do you have a stats for that vacancy as well? Because it could be as big, and it's something that I'm very interested in as well. Sorry, very interested in, because there isn't much data available either about that. And one of the issues with vacant properties is that at some point they become derelict, and then you have to demolish them, because at some point they are in a condition that it makes them very difficult to be renovated, because then it's not only because it's not economical, but it's safety as well. So I think if we have to tackle demolition, we should start earlier with avoiding properties going vacant. So are you doing any work around that as well?
Currently, we're not looking at vacancy in our legal proposal of the European Citizens Initiative. However, what we do say, and that's also very much related, is that of course, we try to think about the use and the vacancy when we do our advocacy work. However, I guess one of the main points around how we chose the legal proposals was how we spoke to so many different experts who also looked at the renovation wave. So there are legal pursuits in the European Union around the construction sector, and we try to fill in the gaps that are currently not addressed.
And what are those gaps means also addressing the barriers. So what are the main barriers that you are encountering along the way? Even you talk about that law. Who you think is the biggest barrier, or are there many? Or could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think so. At the moment, we kind of like split the European Citizens Initiative over this year, kind of almost half and half. So we said that we will try and raise awareness and gain signatures in the very beginning. So that what I can already tell you about a big barrier is that people have no understanding about the issues that the built environment has on their lives. So how renovation is related to their lives, that it is actually cheaper, very clearly cheaper to have an old apartment than a new apartment, because the production chain or the chain of space production is so expensive, materials are so expensive, labor is so expensive, demolishing and building a new, your flat will immediately become more expensive, clearly. So that this is linked is to many people just not very clear, because it's not talked about. So that's one of the biggest barriers we're facing with raising signatures. I'm sure there's many more issues that will come up from a lobbying side and in this advocacy work, but that is yet to come.
Okay, so you're at the early stage. Okay, it would be good to follow up and see what you're finding, and it would be good also to find out who is supporting you. But I guess having the support of the OBEL Foundation and their network as well, hopefully will help to make your voice heard. So on the sorry, the percentage. We talk about the number of buildings that are being demolished, and you said it's 1 per minute. The conservative figure, 3 minutes. But what is in your? I don't know if you have data yet. The realistic figure of buildings could be retained, or you think every single building could be retained, no matter in what conditions they are?
No, we're not entirely against demolition. It's really more about changing the value of thinking that we live in this throwaway society, that we throw something away and we buy something new. And that in and of itself is a problem of the industry and of course, this kind of like value and the understanding of like how developers and the entire chain makes money, right? Like this kind of idea of profit that is, of course, only made. We have a fantastic film called The Demolition Drama, which I highly recommend. It's on YouTube. It's available for everybody. And there we have a fantastic economist, Anne Pettifor, who describes, especially about, for example, the UK, that as an island has a very specific kind of mass and how in order to produce or continue producing or gaining profit out of that space, you need to demolish and build anew again because there's just not more space to build on. And that is kind of like the understanding of that and the value of that. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to change, and that is also related to these barriers that you're talking about.
And when you gathered that data you said earlier, is that data available in your website, and is that data divided per region or country? So let's say I'm currently based in Ireland, and I work in Ireland and the UK mainly, but I also work in Denmark and Nordic countries, a bit in Spain. So could I find out what's the problem, the scale of the problem on each region? Or you are addressing it as a whole?
It's hard to say in like the specific localized regions because we've only looked at, or not only, but we're trying to, of course, look at the European main stats. There's the Architecture Council Europe sector study that's very valuable that we kind of like try and incorporate a lot. And then, of course, I think there are loads of countries that actually try, or not only countries, there are, and we can see this more and more, initiatives that are trying to gather data. There are several initiatives there that have started demolition atlases, but they are, there's actually one that's trying to bring it together on a European scale, but there are several different ones in different countries, from Greece to Switzerland, actually, that are now trying to really track what is demolished.
That's very interesting. It would be good. So what we can do, if you can share a link to those, and we'll put a link to your film as well when we publish the podcast, so people can see it. So for the audience, please check the links when this is published or released. So when you talk about the link between the economy and the profit and the demolition, seems like it's the main driver for that to happen, which means that it's also in cities and in the more dense areas where demolition happen the most. Are you having those conversations as well with city councils? Because I guess that's where the biggest problem is, more than in rural areas.
Yes. We are also talking to more local partners. I mean partners, but also to municipalities. I've also recently been to the C14 meeting where loads of mayors come together and talk about these issues. I think there is an awareness and understanding. It's just we're trying to work with the partners that are in the countries that are really capable to do that within also the languages, because in Europe that's really becoming extremely clear that you do need to speak the language in order to have this conversation. And we're trying to kind of be the organizers that are helping the partners that are having these important conversations.
That's a good point. And are you finding local partners that are working in similar initiatives and collaborating with them to develop it faster?
There are many that, and it's interesting because we have not met another European citizens initiative. There was one before that kind of worked on housing that ran, I think, a few years ago. But we don't know any other sort of like European scale initiative like this. There are many within the countries that are working on there's a German word for this, which is very hard to find an English one for. It's called Bauwende, so the change within the construction sector. And we have a lot of people who are trying to do that from different levels. You know what you said earlier. There is you work on. I mean, there's just within this understanding. There is a beginning of that it starts with when do you start, like how do you build a building, how do you imagine a building, what kind of materials are used, and then like how are they reused, is something demolished, is not demolished, like this entire chain of understanding and action. That's I think there's loads of different initiatives that are coming together.
I think it's very good because then you could be, or probably you are becoming that already, a catalyst that will accelerate all the things that maybe at the local level it has been difficult for them to progress, maybe, but then with your help and with the traction you're getting, it will make their work easier as well, and by collaborating with you. So that would be interesting as well, and I like to see that happening. So if there is anything that's already happening on your website, it would be good to publish it as well. And for other initiatives that are aligned with HouseEurope, it would be good for them to reach out to you, I guess, and explore collaborations.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Yeah. And Jesper, I'd like to ask you one question now as well, is what is the feedback that you are getting and your colleagues in the OBEL Foundation are getting about giving the award to HouseEurope?
It's only, and I don't say this to be smart and think, it's only positive. They think that it's wonderful that we as a foundation are able to put focus on an initiative rather than going for the pretty picture that works well on Instagram. Then we took the hard road and gave the award to an initiative. It's hard for us. It's difficult for us to communicate. It would have been much easier had it been a building, but this is extremely important that we within the industry take a critical look at ourselves and our way of working, our way of how we set up the whole construction industry, and relate that to the real world, because this is something that is at the core of what we do, is that we want to relate to the real world. We're in a real world. We have real world problems. We don't have any Instagram problems, so that's why. And I think Alina is right. Going from signing a petition to do with EU law and so on, how does that affect my everyday life? And I have to pick up the kids and buy some groceries and stuff like that, and that's why we need to be much more aware of that communication gap. How can we bridge that? And I think that an initiative like HouseEurope bridges that, and we can only help by putting focus on that initiative.
Okay. No, I think it's remarkable, and it's something, if you talk about demolition, it's probably something that most of the people in the construction industry are aware of. And at political level as well, I think, I would like to think, but it's true that it didn't get enough focus. So hopefully, as I said, this is the trigger that will bring more attention, because I know I've talked to other smaller, or not smaller, but local, I think the word is more local organizations. So it's good to see this happening at European level. My next question then is, are you getting feedback? Are you getting expression of interest to collaborate with you from other continents?
Yes, strangely, yes.
Countries outside of Europe.
Yes, I was. So there is people from the Americas, I would now say, really, and then also from Asia, who are telling us they have similar issues. We have very little knowledge, but what we've been trying to do so far is actually also from Australia. Several people from Australia have come forward like, can we do a HouseEurope Australia? I'm like, or House Australia or something like that. I was like, yes, please. So what we're trying, of course, to say is that we're trying to give away somehow the idea of how we are organizing somehow. This tool of the initiative, like this European citizen, is a very specific kind. There are petitions. You can do public campaigning everywhere. That's fantastic. And then there is also the understanding of how do you use legislation as a tool. And I think that's super interesting for architects, who are mostly the people who come and say, or somehow within that field, and say, hey, we want to do something along those lines because we see the issues there as well. And then that kind of varies, I assume, quite a lot between. I mean, it actually varies within the countries in Europe, so it also varies very much across the globe. And those laws kind of need to be looked at locally, I assume. But we're trying to give away the idea.
So you think we are going to see? Oh, before I ask that, I think it's you. I guess what you want as well is to focus in Europe, because if you try to spread too much, then you might spread too thin. So, and then you wouldn't get as much traction. But if you give away, as you were saying, your idea and your process, we might end up with House Africa, House America, House Asia. Is that something you see happening? You foresee?
Foreseeing is hard to say. I think it's not only about. I mean, we're a very small team, so it's not only about saying like, oh, you can't be part of that. It should be actually. I don't think it would diminish what it is here. It's just a very specific. Like the work we're doing this year is so specifically linked to the European Union, even that like Switzerland is not really involved, and like there's other. We've had other partners come in who are interested for their countries, and and there was someone like a student's like, I want to show this in Albania. I'm like, please go for it. But it's just for the work that we're doing in the small team, we're really just focusing on this right now, because we also do want to still have an impact, even if we no matter if we get the million or not, we will still do the advocacy work, because we do believe that this is partially a good step towards where we want to go. It's not a radical solution, but it's one step towards a better life together.
And I think one way on that, and you talk about awareness, and probably it's the education piece that you were referring to earlier. Are you collaborating with academia, universities across Europe to reinforce that message?
Much like you've seen and you've mentioned, many universities now work on this. Students are really interested in the topic. So we have had different universities come to us and say, hey, can we do a studio on this? How can we work on it? Can we incorporate HouseEurope? How can we support you? So there's a lot of student networks who are actually working on it as well. We have with ETH our studio that is a campaign office. So students who join us also join the campaign. And we're trying to also see how we can build society together.
But I think coming back to what you said about when you were at architecture school, it's burgeoning in every architecture school. I feel in most of the world, at least in Europe, it's almost like a paradigm shift is happening. That we see the value of buildings differently. We have a different set of aesthetic. What is aesthetic value? There's a whole shift towards using what's already there rather than coming up with new things and inventing the wheel all the time. So I think you're right. It's starting to grow, and it starts often in the schools.
No, that's definitely great to see. There are so many things we could be talking here. I don't even know. 35 minutes already, and we said we'll try to beat 30, and there are so many things I would like to ask. But instead of me asking, well, actually, I'm going to ask you one, but it's more to give you a voice. If you could convince from all the stakeholders that are involved in construction, and when I say construction involves planning, policy, building, designing, everything, if you could convince one of the stakeholders, or where would you focus your message? Not your message, or if you knew that they are going to listen and do what you would like them to do, who would you focus your message
Well, I
on?
personally would focus on the very last part of that chain, which is the users and which is the public. And I would say, please have I mean, the message is really, this is part of our lives so much, like your decision on not throwing away food, not buying fast fashion, maybe not flying. It's very much related to our lives. So if you can, please sign the initiative. It will it will make a difference. I think that's what I would say.
That's very interesting. I thought you were going to say something about policy makers and people at the top, but you are taking the bottom-up approach, which I think is, I've seen that happening on carbon, for example, and deviating a bit here, but on the carbon reductions, I've seen a lot of change coming from the end user, that they demand that product or that house or that office where there is low embodied carbon, low operational energy consumption, and that forces the developers and the founders to, sorry, not the founders, sorry, the funders to focus on that. So I think that's a really good response. And Jesper, what will be your approach? Now you've heard, so you might agree with Alina. So in that case, that's fine. Or who would be second? So let's agree that the first one is the.
Well, I can just say that from of all the we've had to punch in our titles when we started this podcast, right? And you often have to punch in your titles whenever you do something. And of all the titles you have throughout your life, apart from the one that's related to your family, I've always felt that the most important title that you have is citizen, because then you're part of a larger democratic whole, and it has advantages, but it also has obligations. And I think taking your role as citizens seriously is a very, very, very important, and it's almost should be obligatory, to have citizen actions or citizen initiatives, so that you will give back to the society of which you're part. And I think by just clicking a QR code and signing a petition and then doing your obligation as citizens is a very easy way to take part in shaping the society you're part of.
I think that's a very good message, and I think it's very important. Often we forget about it. I'm not going to say people forget about it. I think we are all part of it, and I think we all often forget about it. So I think I think it's a really good summary actually for the podcast, because it's all about what you're doing, Alina. It's you're focusing on something, but it's all part. I'm sure when you talk about HouseEurope, you talk about many other things that are related to it, because I've seen some of your posts that it's not only about renovating. You talk also about the right for house and all the things that are linked, that are maybe not strictly directed to demolition, but link. And you can, I'm sorry, when you talk, you can make it wider and wider, linked to what Jesper said about citizenship, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's why we said as HouseEurope, this is like, it's one part of our work. We will not stop after this, no matter if we reach the million or not, because we just believe that we together can make the built environment better, and our living conditions. And that's, for me, starts from the bottom up. But as maybe we're coming full circle, what I kind of said earlier as well, I think I still believe, like, no matter if it says executive director or campaign manager, it doesn't matter in which position you are. Genuinely, I believe that you have the power to change something in which position, whichever you are, even if like it really, I fully believe that.
No, and I think it's true, because when you talk about why are we not renovating more buildings, why are we demolishing? different stakeholders will start pointing fingers at others, say, well, it's not my responsibility, it's the other responsibility. I'm only the designer. I have a client. The client will say it's the founder. So I think you're right, it's a shared thing. Now, to finish, before we finish, I would like to give you, Alina, the voice. So because if you want to reach that 1 million signatures, if you could send a brief message that then we can post on social media and people can listen to it, to encourage people to make that signature, everybody, not as you said that you want the general public to do it. So what would be that message?
One that you can
take your time.
show on social media. Okay, you mean as a quick clip?
Yeah, but it could be a bit longer as well if you want. This whatever you want. It's like we are not going to limit your time. Don't worry about it. Is what would be your message to those that, as you said earlier, are not aware of the problem? They are not even aware. So it's a call to say at least look at our website. Or
I think coming for, from our entire conversation, and you are also looking at or wanting to know about the statistics and the facts and the figures. There's maybe two things. One is the construction sector has a very big impact on our lives. It is bigger than flying. It is bigger than buying fast fashion. It is bigger than throwing away food. It is directly linked to how we live and how we live together. So I would very much encourage everybody to sign the initiative. It takes 30 seconds. It costs you nothing. And it will really help a lot of people. And I think that's kind of the message that I would send out. We looked at so many different ways of engaging people, and maybe also trying to, statistics is one thing that is interesting within the industry. The other thing is, how do you make a topic like this really personal? How do you make it so that people have like an emotional response and are like, yes, I want to do that? The other European citizens initiatives that are successful are very much linked to ourselves. So the most recent one that got the 1 million was about abortion rights, and everyone has an immediate understanding that this is really important for us. But how, I think that's why we're now looking also at like, how can we discuss housing within that frame, because that's really something that is much easier to understand. That's kind of like breaking down a barrier. With the word housing instead of renovation is breaking down a barrier.
Thank you. And Jesper, anything you would like to say to the audience about it and to support?
Well, I echo everything that Alina says, but I also think that taking a critical approach to things that you're told. So when you're told that it's much more expensive to build new, I think our coming generations would disagree, and things that the way that we quantify things now is most likely be a very poor measure of cost.
And I think, and just to finish, because we could start another conversation with this, is also the difference between cost and value. Because when you think about value, that's a much broader picture and approach to what we do and the implications of our decisions. But anyway, we'll leave that for another time. So thank you very much, Alina and Jesper, for your time today. And I hope I will, of course, and we will from Sure Design keep following your progress, and we'll be happy to collaborate and share and help to disseminate your knowledge and your work. So please keep us posted on that. And hopefully in a couple of years' time or in a year time, whenever you have that 1 million signatures, and we can talk again about how things are starting to be implemented.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Good.